page is basically a book 101 review, and we have a couple pages of 101 review before we go into 201, and it's just reviewing the theory, the basic information that we learned in the first book, so that we can know how to better understand the guitar and eventually get to where we can transpose songs and play the different chords that we hear. So let me just do a brief outline of book 101 review, just in case you missed that or you're just joining in on the intermediate book. So what we have is a major scale study, and we started with half steps and whole steps and understanding what those were. A half step being one note up or one note back from a note wherever you might be on the guitar or on the piano. And we used a piano and said we had white keys and black keys, and we used the white keys that were natural notes and black keys were sharps. They are also flats, but we just called them sharps so that we would be able to communicate that easily rather than being confused saying sharps or flats. They are the same note. We just call them sharps based on the keys that we were working in. So we had black keys that were called the sharps, and then we had naturals that were the white keys. And we basically looked through the major scale formula in order to find a major scale, and we used a major scale formula, which is, hopefully if you've taken the first class you might start remembering that now. It's 2 whole steps, a half step, 3 whole steps, a half step, and we should be back to the note that we started on. So like if we're in the key of C, we would write out the major scale, and it's going to be C, whole step to D, whole step to E, half step to F, whole step to G, whole step to A, whole step to B, and then half step back to C. So we should end on the same note that we started on. Now if we're getting into a little bit more unique major scales in that they might have some sharps in them, we might do an A major scale, which is going to be A, whole step to B, whole step to C sharp, half step to D, whole step to E, whole step to F sharp, whole step to G sharp, and half step to A. And so you can see that if you're looking through the piano and seeing the half step, whole step variation on a major scale, how that works, and make sure that you include the natural and the sharps notes when you count that up from on the piano. Okay, so that was the major scale formula. Then we talk about chord families and the chord families that come off of the major scale. When we have a major scale, we basically end up where we can identify chords in those major scales, and we take the first note, the fourth note, and the fifth note, and we identify them as major chords. So we take, in the key of C, we had C, F, and G as the first note, fourth note, and fifth note, and we just identify them as major chords, and we played through some of those chords and we heard how they worked together well. And then we also did, actually we did 5 keys. So we could do that again here to understand that there are chords that we can identify in the major scales as 1, 4, 5 major chords. And then from there we went and looked at 4 foundational chord types, which were major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Major being a little happy or pleasing sounding, minor being sad or somber. Then we had a diminished chord, which was basically descending from the major chord. It's going to descend into the next chord, and then augmented being ascending or moving forward into the next chord. So you can hear the difference between those sounds, and we can also write those notes if we were to write out the major scale and write out the first, third, and the fifth note, and do the variation based on whether it's a sharp or a flat, that we have to go back 1/2 step or go up 1/2 step to create those chords. So that's where we left off, and we have the chords for Beginner 101 as well in the first part of this book, so you can see what chords we've learned in Beginner 101. If you haven't taken Beginner 101, but you want to review the information in 101, you might consider going and picking up a book, the Beginner 101 book. You may not need a class if you're already in the information on the intermediate class. You're probably a little bit more advanced than the class, but you might go back and look and make sure that your foundation is solid in regard to learning perfectly and playing well, and make sure that you don't have any kinks that will mess up your continued success as you learn the guitar. So I'm excited to get started. This is Intermediate 201, and we will build on this stuff that we learned in beginner class. So let's go to the next page and we'll start this week's lesson.